Hello, welcome to Miss Peepers Reading Corner. I'm Katrina, aka Miss Peepers. Let's talk about books. Today we're talking about Mythos by Stephen Fry. In Mythos, Stephen Fry, who has been fascinated by Greek mythology since he was a young child, tells the stories of Greek mythology in his own words. Now, while I have this physical version of the book, when I tried to read this, I mentioned this in another video. When I tried to read this, I found it a bit challenging to stay focused because it is very much like a textbook where you've got the different sections, the different pieces. It's got pictures in it, which is actually, I like the illustrations and the photos of different Greek artifacts, but I had trouble focusing on it. So I decided to try the audiobook, which is read by the author himself. And I'm not a huge audiobook person, but Stephen Fry is also a professional actor. So not only is he reading his own book, he has the skill set to read it in an engaging and entertaining way. So I'm really glad that I did that because I enjoyed this book immensely. The stories are in largely chronological order, in the order that they would have happened, beginning with the Greeks' creation stories. I really appreciated the way that Stephen Fry includes dialogue in these stories, and the dialogue is somewhat modernized, but it's very true to what the original story would have been like. It's simply told in our vernacular, which I think makes the stories more accessible in a lot of ways. He also ties the stories together, reminds you who different characters are because there are many, many figures across all of these stories, and he offers connections from the stories to modern day. For example, the word narcissist comes from the story of Narcissus, who falls in love with his own reflection. Many of these I knew already, I'd heard elsewhere, but some were new to me, and I really appreciated the way that he discusses that etymology, where these words come from and where these ideas come from. And in some cases, how we think about those terms or those ideas differently from the way the Greeks did. So it gives you a little peek into what Greek life would have been like at the time that Greeks were telling these stories. One critique I have of the book, other than the way it's printed, that feels very textbook-ish, is that the beginning stories are very much lists of things. That's another reason that I glazed over a little bit. In some of the earlier stories, there's not a whole lot happening. There's not a whole lot in the way of action. So it's more creation. These things were created, and then those things were created, and then these people were created, and then those people were created. And they don't do a whole lot. They just create, create, create. And I realized that that is what a creation story is. A lot of things being created before things can actually happen. It gets kind of repetitive for me at the beginning. But once we get into the action, into the stories as they are happening, into the interactions between the different figures in these stories, it's a lot of fun. And I do highly recommend the audiobook. I recommend any audiobook that's read by Stephen Fry. He's a delightful narrator. He's a lot of fun to listen to. The other thing that I appreciate about this book is that it's written in a way that you don't have to have a lot of really any knowledge about Greek mythology going into it. And I think many of us have picked up bits and pieces here and there, even if we haven't had like a strictly classical education. I mean, I remember learning a bit about Greek mythology, maybe in elementary school, but then the rest comes from things like the Hercules movie and um, and Clash of the Titans, which I realize are not definitive works, though they are inspired by definitive works. And so having that idea that not everyone is coming in with the same amount of knowledge, so let's just start from the beginning. I think that was a great way for Fry to make this really accessible to any kind of reader. And it's very clear that Stephen Fry himself both came in with a lot of knowledge into writing this book, but also did a fair amount of research. And he talks at times about how I couldn't find a definitive answer on this question, so here's how I interpret this. But your mileage may vary, or this story has been lost and I couldn't find any references to it. So he clearly is he clearly spent a fair amount of time thinking through how he was going to write these stories out and make the characters real, and then also how he was going to organize them and what references he was going to include. And then he has in the back here 2 pages, 2.5 pages, really, of sources of where he gets, I know it's probably hard to see, of where he gets the information, both from ancient writing and then also from more modern writing. He talks to you about how to say the Greek names, which is helpful if you're reading it, and why things are spelled, how things are spelled, and just so many. And then there's an index if you want to skip to certain stories. It's very well researched. It's very well written, and I really recommend it if you have any interest in Greek mythology whatsoever, whether you know a lot about it or only a little. I think you can get something out of this book, and just an enjoyment of the stories, if nothing else, and an idea of where our stories come from, because nothing is created in a vacuum, and you can see lines from some of these stories towards our modern stories as well, which is so fun and fascinating. So that's it, a short and sweet one for you all today. Have you read Mythos by Stephen Fry, or anything else by him for that matter? Let me know in the comments. And either way, whatever you do, keep reading.